I'm looking through my, wow. I'm looking through my old book. Well, it still looks new. I bought this book. I bought this book in 2002. 32 years old. Really interested in looking at life symbolically, poetically. And this was really my introduction to the idea of archetypes and how symbolic roles and flavors show up for us in our lives. I wanted to talk a little bit about archetypes today, not in any technical way. I don't even have the vocabulary to do that effectively. I want to talk about it experientially and observationally. I want to talk about a particular grouping of archetypes that I've noticed in the last 25, 30 years or so. When I was just starting out as a young graphic designer in Baltimore in the 90s, I moved to Baltimore in 1993, in the fall of 1993. I was 23 years old. I had just received a master's from the University of Pennsylvania. However, everyone in that master's program was really on their way to either getting a PhD in communications. I was at the Annenberg School at the time, the Annenberg School for Communication at Penn. And a lot of my classmates were either going on to get a PhD so that they could be academicians, they could be, professors wherever teaching communications or communication, or they were either they were going to do research or they were going to teach, but most of them were going on to do a PhD. What happened to me was that I didn't really have the desire to do that. And not only that, one day I was walking through the hall at Annenberg, and we had these bulletin boards back then where they had flyers for other graduate programs and other internships and different opportunities. They were kind of posted on this bulletin board. And I saw a poster, which I still remember to this day. And I think I probably took a picture of it somewhere. But it was a poster for the, what it was called then was Publication Design Program at University of Baltimore. And it was a picture of a man's body in a business suit, but instead of a head, there was a book. And it was kind of Magritte, it was very attention getting. And I saw this flyer and I was like, what's this? And I learned that there was a program at the University of Baltimore that blended writing and design. Now, I had been teaching myself what I called layout for 2 or 3 years. I was always doing newsletters for the Black Graduate Association. When I was in undergrad, I was doing a newsletter for the Black students. Back then it was called the African Peoples Organization at Hofstra, APO. But I did a newsletter for them, and I was always kind of teaching myself design. And when I realized I could learn it formally and I could blend my interest in writing, I got very excited because from what I had learned, you really needed to have a fine arts background to become a graphic designer back then. And this was one of the few ways that I found that I could actually get formal training without going back and having to do all this art stuff. because I was never a fine arts person, a painter. I never learned fine arts formally. So I saw this poster when I was at Penn, and that pretty much put me on a trajectory for the next 30 years. I moved to Baltimore after getting my master's at Penn. I moved to Baltimore. First I applied to this program, this publication design program at University of Baltimore, and I was accepted, and I moved to Baltimore and I got a second master's degree. First, I was getting my master's at Penn at the Annenberg School, and then I got a second master's at University of Baltimore. And I learned design. I was inducted into that world. I learned all about design, typography, and everything involved with that. I had amazing instructors. I got involved with the American Institute for Graphic Arts. I was a committee member, and then eventually I was the president of the Baltimore chapter, and it was just a good life. You know, I was in my very early 30s by the time all of this was done. But I noticed something when I first got to Baltimore. I met this woman. I don't know whatever happened to her, and I don't even really want to say her name because I'm not even sure that, she would want this story told. But anyway, I met this woman I met a bunch of graphic designers because I was looking for them, like, what is your life like? What are you doing? What is graphic design? Tell me more. And so, I landed in Baltimore at the age of 23, and I was in this design program from 1993 to 1995. So from the age of 23 to the age of 25. And I was just hungry, meeting people, talking to people, doing a lot of networky, informational interview types of stuff back then. And one of the women I met was recommended to me because that's how it was. It's like, oh, you're interested in design, young lady? Talk to this person, talk to that person. And so I found this woman that way. And she said, oh, I'll talk to you, but just so you know, I'm leaving graphic design to become a midwife. And I thought, oh, okay. And so we talked, and she was very kind and very encouraging, and she gave me whatever feedback, insights, information she had, and that was it. I never saw her again. But that kind of was lodged in my mind, like, oh, she was a designer and then she became a midwife. How interesting. My feeling was, why would anyone leave graphic design? Like, I was just at the beginning of my career, and I was just obsessed with it. So I was like, wow, why would anyone do that? A few years later, now I'm working as a designer. I've got my second master's. I've started my business. I've got clients. I've got a lot going on. Things are going well. And so maybe it's about 10 years later-ish, 8, 9, 10 years later. I'm in my early 30s now, 33, 34, so not quite 10 years later. And I'm listening to Hay House Radio all the time. Like, Hay House Radio was an online internet radio station created by Hay House, and they had amazing programming. And this is, like I said, it's like the early 2000s. So it's like 2003, 2004, around there, 2002, 2003, 2004. So I'm listening to Hay House Radio constantly. They had Carolyn Mace. They had Mona Lisa Schultz, who has passed away from what I understand. They had they had Abraham Hicks. They had all these wonderful Cheryl Richardson, so many. Michael Neal, a lot of people back then who were talking about personal development from a spiritual standpoint, metaphysical stuff. And I loved it, loved it. It was like my world. It was like, these are my people. So I'm listening to Hay House Radio, and the programming director, who also had a program, a show on the network, her name was Summer McStravick, and she used to have a show called Flow Dreaming, and it was, a show about manifestation and all this other stuff. And I used to listen to Summer McStravick. But what I learned about Summer McStravick was that she had been a graphic designer. And now she was doing this spiritual personal development stuff at Hay House Radio. And I thought, that's interesting. That's kind of like that other lady. There's something there. And then I felt myself being pulled also through this kind of creative realm into this other place that was more well-being oriented, healing oriented. I was developing an interest in why we are, how we are, and how we can be what we need to be and want to be. I was getting pulled into that. And so another 10 years went by, and now I'm in my mid to late 40s. And I'm really beginning to think about, where am I going? Where is my work going? Where is my life going? I have, at this point, more than 20 years under my belt as a graphic designer. And I've invested a lot of time and energy cultivating my spiritual life and really being interested in metaphysical things. A lot of things I wasn't really vocal about. I wasn't really verbal about, because back then there was still some stigma around talking about metaphysical things and, manifesting. Now it's like, I think I saw a Tide commercial the other day, or some laundry detergent commercial where they put affirmations on the front of a detergent bottle. And I thought, wow, we've really come a long way, because I remember the Saturday Night Live sketch with Al Franken, where he was just, mocking people who were doing affirmations in the mirror, Stuart Smalley. And now we have affirmations on the detergent bottles and commercials. So anyway, back then it wasn't really something people talked about as freely. Of course, this was around the time that the movie The Secret came out, and then things started to change after that. And a lot of us who had already been talking about this stuff and thinking about this stuff, The Secret was fine, but it was incomplete, and it was kind of a little cartoony or whatever. But a lot of people watched it and benefited from it, and it was definitely a cultural moment. Anyway, all that was going on, and I was, that was 2006 or so. So fast forward to the 2010s, and I'm in my 40s, and I'm kind of like, okay, how do I make my life work better? That's the question I'm always asking. How do I make my life work better? And I'm thinking about it and doing all the things. I wrote a little bit about this period in my book, Trust Yourself with Money. It was a difficult time financially and emotionally in general, but I was learning about myself, who I am, and how to function and how to really survive and how to experience some form of well-being as a human being with all of the restrictions that life has to offer. So as I landed in my late 40s and started going into my 50s, I started really considering this grouping of archetypes. To me, as I deepened into my own interests, my own gifts, my own work, my own understanding, I could see that there was a pairing that I would call the artist, teacher, healer. If you think about these three terms archetypally or symbolically, meaning you might not be an artist who has a gallery or an artist who is doing a show, but you might bring an artist's bearing, posture, mindset, vibe to your work. You might have the artist archetype. You might not be a teacher employed in a school or in a university or a college, but you might find yourself always being the one who explains, always being someone who's concerned about whether or not people understand something, always wanting to support, clarify, connect the dots. So you have the teacher archetype as an active element of who you are. That's what I mean. It's like the symbolic kind of essential way that you are in the world. And I started noticing this pairing, artist, teacher, healer. And I thought back to the woman I met when I was starting out as a designer. I thought back to Summer McStravick. I thought back to other people that I knew who seemed to have this pairing, to seem to have an artist part of who they were, a teacher part of a natural kind of teacher element to who they were, and then this healer element, someone who cared about well-being, someone who cared about how to help people be more effective or feel better or be more of themselves or be more whole somehow. That's probably not what I want to say at all, but be more healthy, be more healthy emotionally, physically, mentally, etc. And this triad, the artist, teacher, healer, it just kind of landed in my being as, oh, this is who you are. This is who you are. This pairing is exactly who you are. It's not that you're moving from being a designer to being a midwife. All of these things together are part of what makes you tick and what makes you who you are. And since that time, I've kind of embraced this triad in thinking about my own development and my own life. And I've noticed it in the world. And I feel like these are my people. These are the people that I want to coach with. These are the people that I want to support. These are the people that I want to listen to, co-regulate with, offer tools and insights to. And when I think about my current coaching practice, those are my people. These people are often entrepreneurial because it's quite difficult to just relax and live inside of the kind of craggy, sharp-edged systems that we navigate in a lot of companies and corporations and institutions. It's not always easy for us to survive these places. It can feel like a kind of life-threatening environment sometimes. So by virtue of that, many of us become entrepreneurial, not because we had a lemonade stand when we were 10, but because it's like we have to find a way to breathe and live and flourish somehow. And the entrepreneurial path is often more realistic for us. So we end up in that realm having to figure that out. And that's a whole other challenge for us, or path of discovery, however you like to put it. So yeah, the artist, teacher, healer, and then the entrepreneurial artist, teacher, healer. Those are my people. And if you're here, you might be one of those people, or you might be transitioning into being one of those people. And yeah, we know a lot about life from a particular kind of perspective. And for us, work is usually a spiritual path. Work for us is usually a developmental path. We are intentional about that. So I just wanted to share that because that's a really important framework for me in my work. And if you're coming closer and coming into my world, I think it's important for you to understand that. And if you see yourself in that, welcome. You'll probably be right at home as you watch this content, as you listen to my podcast, Thriving in Plain Sight. And if you decide to come closer in the future when I have events, or if you want to come closer as a coaching client right now, whatever it is, you'll feel right at home in this world.